I'm Eric Newton, and this is The Together Show. We all know relationships take work, but what is that work, and how do we do it? As a former divorce lawyer, I've watched thousands of couples break up firsthand. Having seen the worst in relationships, I decided to try to help couples stay together. So on this show, we talk to real couples and find out what love really looks like.
I really want this forever. When I was really honest with myself about that, which wasn't hard to do, I was like, that's way more important than variety in bed. Way more important to me.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for listening. And thanks to everyone who has supported us so far on Patreon. It's now time for some of my promised shout-outs to supporters. Now, I'm limiting it to just 2 today, though I must say I'm happy there are many more than that. Andrew Cohen and Odette Kressler, thank you guys so much for your support. Odette will be on our show shortly. She's fantastic. You're going to love the episode. And Andrew, well, let me just say, he's the best chiropractor there ever was. Thanks, guys. I love you both. And if you would like to support what we're up to, check out our crowdfunding campaign at patreon.com/together. That's patreon.com/together. You will be able to see me on video trying to convince you to donate some of your hard-earned dollars to our cause. You may regret watching that video. I have a very large beard, or who knows, maybe you love my beard. Either way, fair warning. Now on to the show. Andy and Jen are the kind of couple that gives everyone else hope for their own relationships. They're fun, they're hilarious, they always have energy for some new adventure, they love parties, and yet they somehow manage to stay grounded. They're the kind of couple that everyone knows that they can rely on in a pinch. And their honeymoon phase, well, let me just say, it seemed to go on forever. How could they be happy for so long? How could they possibly hold down 2 careers and yet show up for every major event in the city? It defied logic. And so this first episode is all about the secret that they applied to maintain that combination of stability and adventurousness for so very long in their relationship. On Thursday's episode, we'll hear how adding children into the mix changed everything. But more on that in due course. So with that, let's go to Andy and Jen. You two just enjoyed your life so much. I mean, you were always going out and doing something adventurous or creative, and you were always playful.
Remember when, hun?
Do
you remember that?
Well, I do want to know about the transition.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like it just kept going. Like you expect new couples to do that for a month or a week while the dopamine is coursing through their blood. But I mean, you guys kept it going for a couple years.
We had the full 18 months at least of the romance period, if not a couple years. Or longer than that.
I think longer.
Yeah. I think it's because the momentum, like when we met each other, we were definitely neither of us looking to be in a relationship. And
right.
that I
zero
think
expectations, zero looking,
looking, and just like exactly doing everything that we love to do, and like having the time of our lives with all the different things that we were doing. And I think that energy, just like we kind of bounced off of each other and just made more of that once we got together. And actually, we had to have the real like discussion when we started dating. Like I was like, I'm not really interested in being in a relationship. Like I just got out of one. I'm really enjoying not being in one, but God, you're so great, and let's hang out again. But and I think that we just weren't trying so hard. We didn't have a lot of expectations. And
so how long had you known each other before your first child was born? Or how long had you been together?
So that was almost 5 years because we met in July 2007 and she was born April 2012.
That is record breaking. You guys had 5 years of intense playfulness and adventure.
But, what's interesting is that, I mean, I think it's interesting to hear what people's perception is of us. And we were talking about this. We're like, wow, it's so validating to have people sort of say, you are such a model couple for us, or it wasn't until I went to your wedding that I started thinking about the possibility of like true love for myself, or we get all this. And it's so inspiring, and it really does make us feel good. But we're also like, hey, you know, going back to what you were saying, Eric, about the work, like we started couples therapy in year 2 of dating.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a year passed, and then at that point, we're like, all right, you know, both of us were like, I'm not interested in being in a relationship for a long time that's just not going to pan out. Like, there's too much good living to, you know, there's just too much to do. Like, why? I don't want to do that. I don't want to waste my time on something that's just not amazing. And so should we just cut to the chase here and figure out like where we're going with this? And
that was a question that actually came up verbally.
Oh yeah, because we were both like from the get-go, we were like, we could definitely take this all the way to marriage with kids. So let's and to be clear,
are we ready to do that? Like, are we gonna, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like we should go again, seek professional help, not even in crisis, but like let's go uncover and figure out the things that we haven't discussed yet or known about or had the courage to discuss, so that all the cards are on the table, so we can really be prepared for making the big commitment.
Did that work?
Here we are, you know?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it was essential. I think it was
great. I would advise
what did you talk about in therapy?
We talked about monogamy.
Yeah.
We talked about...
was that an open question for you?
Yeah, I think both of us were like, are we gonna, you know, are we interested in like a long-term monogamous relationship, or what is it, you know, because I was like, I was having so much fun dating lots of people. Like, okay.
She was really good at it.
Oh, it was so fun. I was just a little, anyway. Those days, I remember when. But that was a question that both of us had to sort of, we hadn't really been talking about that. And it was like, our sex life is awesome, super hot. Like we had a great thing going, but it was more, both of us came from a lot, well, I did certainly a lot of relationship experience. And I'm like, look, I know what the big issues are. You know, it's like the long-term commitment thing is something that I'm like, I haven't really nailed it, and I've tried a couple times. So is that something that I can do? Andy, are you really, like, you haven't really had a long-term relationship? Andy hadn't had a long-term relationship. And I'm like, you know, I wasn't very, I'm so glad Andy had like Jennifer version 3.0 is what I always say. And I sort of felt like I was getting, in terms of relationships, like Andy 1.0. And I was like, wow, he might get into this and be like, I don't really want to do this long-term thing. But I knew at that point, like, what it would require and demand to get into.
Because you've already been through 2 7-year relationships. So what does it require? Is that something you can say in? Well,
probably monogamy for me, you know, but with some openness to maybe some non-monogamous, you know, experiences. But certainly, like, I'm not interested in being in a open relationship per se. So let's just talk, you know. So we talked about that, and then there was issue. I had doubts about whether Andy was really ready.
Yeah. And
without him having been in a long-term relationship, I was like, I don't know how you're going to know that this is something that you want to do. And I had certain amount of neuroses about, like, I don't know if Andy really is going to be ready for this.
That's interesting.
You're in a dubious period, somewhere between like year 1 and 2.
Yeah, and I was a divorcee, so I had all this, you know.
Well, and also I guess the evidence was the two of you were partying. So was it really real? It was a legitimate question.
We knew it was real, I think.
Well,
our connection was really intense.
Yeah, it was really intense, certainly.
Like, we trusted that.
Yeah, and it really, when we say partying, like, we were having a lot of fun and going out dancing and stuff, but there really wasn't a lot of, like, intoxication to it.
Yeah, partying means different things to different people. You guys were going out and having fun.
Dancing.
We were going out and having fun. That's also important to me, because I know a lot of people fall in love at Burning Man because they're on a lot of drugs that make you make love really easy, and then they get back and they're like, wait, this isn't working
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I'm so surprised, you know. And ours was certainly a rocket ship of like that initial, the love chemicals that take you over, but it was very real.
Grounded.
And that
Yeah.
was what was funny, because I had such a calm, grounded feeling of my confidence, and I never had those doubts.
Yeah.
Ever. And it's funny
With
that
me,
you
you mean?
and it's funny that you
Right.
did, but it was like projecting doubts.
Yeah.
Because you were good, but you were doubtful that I actually wanted to be with you, and I was like, no, I'm good. I know this is what I want.
But Andy, for yourself, you sent me this email earlier today, which says, by the way, you might not have known this, I was never in a relationship longer than 14 months.
14 months.
prior to-
But I
prior to
had
Jennifer.
quantity over.
But how did you know? I mean, how could you even know for yourself?
I think that it is possible to know things without prior experience. I mean, why did you had your first marriage certainly thinking it was going to last, and it didn't, but it doesn't mean that was a failure. It means,
Oh yeah, right.
you know,
I agree.
and that's and look at your former profession of what do we have, a 50% divorce rate, and there's people who've been together for a really long time who certainly thought they could do it. So I felt like we had such a strong groundwork of self-awareness, thanks to a lot of individual therapy, which I also wanted to talk about. That's pretty critical. Both of us have been through a lot of therapy. We've
Billions and billions of dollars.
We spent a lot of money on therapy. It's really important.
Yeah, no, it is. I
It's
think it
super
helped
important.
us kind of do the work pretty efficiently.
Yeah, and I think for me, what I was trying to come to terms with, I was like, gosh, it's such a cliche male perspective, but I was basically like, have I slept with enough women? Like, have I had enough experience out there? And it's so dumb to put it into those words.
Were
but
you
that's
thinking
what I said
that at that time?
Yes,
That's what you were saying?
I said that in therapy.
Did you say it out loud?
And
Oh, high five.
I mean, it took
yeah.
a lot of work to bring up.
It
the
was
courage.
in couples that
Yeah.
when we went there, so it was in like the
A safe
safety
and- a
with
safe- yeah.
another
Yeah.
person to just
Nonetheless.
bring it up, and so we worked through a lot of
How
that.
did you answer that question for yourself?
Well, I basically weighed the pros and the cons. No, seriously, I was like, well, I certainly the my limbic brain animal self would like to just keep on being free, and not just because of the sex, but just because like I was very good at being single. I didn't have relationships longer than like 3 to 6 months generally, and it was because I figured out so quickly that I didn't want to be with the person. That was it. I was like, why am I gonna mess around here? This is a waste. I don't need to be with someone just to be with someone. Right. And so it was so different with Jen, and she didn't play games at all, which was huge for me. There's no bullshit from this woman.
Yeah.
She was so strong and so confident and so beautiful, and just such a still. I mean, she remains a beacon of positivity among our friends, and I'm the moody one for sure. And I was just like, I really want this forever. And that when I was really honest with myself about that, which wasn't hard to do, I was like, that's way more important than variety in bed. Way more important to me.
I think a lot of men are inflicted with that
Very
need
much
for
so.
variety, and I'm curious where you think it comes from.
So I've thought about it, and I think for me it's like little single serving packets of falling in love, and you get like a little hit of like, oh, this is what this person likes. Oh, this is, for me, it's like a little bit of a power trip.
Yeah.
Like I can feel this and have this be new, but there's I don't have to take the garbage out in the morning and pay bills,
Yeah.
And again, once I really looked at that objectively, it was there weren't a lot of pros in the camp of variety. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, but it's
Right.
so addictive. That affliction just takes you over.
Right.
And then it becomes
And it's ultimately unfulfilling.
And it's
Right,
ultimately
it's
unfulfilling.
fleeting.
Yeah, and I knew that from experience and from the fact that it's such a cliche.
Right. If you're just joining us, you're listening to the Together Show, the podcast about what's really going on in relationships. I'm your host, Eric Newton, and with me today in the studio are Jennifer Tuvison and Andy McElroy. And Jennifer, so I wanted to ask you this question about divorce. So you were in a marriage, you committed to it for life, you got divorced. Then you were in another intense relationship that, I assume when you got into it, you thought was going to last, and it ended. And now you're in a relationship that you think is going to last. But what if something changes? What if he changes? Or what if you change? Or what if the dynamic changes and you're not getting those positive feelings that you think are so necessary, or I assume you do? Could this one, now you said to him you're not leaving, but is that real? I mean, how do you know?
I pretty much feel like I know, but if there's two things. One is if I'm pretty, like Andy said, about just not wasting time or just being very upfront and putting things on the table. I don't let much time go by if I feel like there's something unresolved for me or for us. And I feel like now I can see, having learned what I've learned in the past, like I think I'd start to see the red flags, like, and a big topic, one of the biggest thing for me is connection, like feeling connected to Andy. And anytime I start feeling disconnected, I kind of start freaking out and I'm like, Andy, why am I feeling this way? What's going on? And I would definitely, hopefully, before it became like an actual crisis to the point where it's just likely not to work, I would have liked to think that we would have put ourselves in couples, that I would go back to individual therapy and we'd really explore. Is this just a funky phase we're going through and there's room for being a little bit disconnected, or is there something pretty grave that we need to address, and is it addressable or not? And
then if you got through that whole process of the therapy, the couples therapy, the individual therapy, the lots of communication and talking, and you just were not connected,
I'd be like, we have kids. There's no choice. We haven't even talked about our kids. I mean, that is like kids aside, right?
Yeah.
And then when you put the kids in, it would have to be so bad.
Like what?
Oh, I think it would have to be us being I think if the family, if we couldn't continue to have each other's interests almost like in front of our own, I think that's kind of what it takes. And we're so glad that even through the stress of raising children, we are not the couple that takes it out on each other. We get so stressed, and we're like at our limits these days with just all the responsibilities we have, and we still don't bitch and like get passive aggressive with each other. And I feel like if it started getting like that and we just couldn't give each other the love and the respect to sort of stay calm and loving, and I mean, that could quickly drive me away. Like, I'm not going to spend time in an environment that's really toxic, but I think we have the tools to avoid getting to that level. So I'm just not that worried.
Yeah.
I would also
ahead.
like to point out that I would challenge that every time you think of a couple that's grown apart, or they don't do it for each other anymore, or they fight too much. It's not like they were good one day and then they woke up the next day and all of a sudden they were bad. They started drifting apart, and at some point, when they finally recognized that they were apart, they were so far apart. I'm thinking like two boats drifting apart. Just my analogy in my mind right now. They were just like, fuck it. It's not.
Yeah.
It's too much work
To get all the way
to
back there.
I don't even know if
Yeah.
maybe if we can get back together, are we really gonna like each other anymore?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's probably not worth it. And I think we hit things on such an immediate level that we're constantly bound on that, and it also helps that neither of us we've been in relationships where people enjoy fighting, and it happens a lot, and it's just not what we like to do to resolve disputes.
I
just-
love your answer that you know, the point at which you would be ready to separate is far down the road.
Far down the path.
And there are so many points along that path where you can make repair attempts
Right.
and come closer together. And that's a good answer. But the reason I asked this question is because I think new couples sometimes have a little bit of the fairy tale mentality about marriage and toss out until death do us part as a vow without really thinking through what that really means. And there are major transitions that happen for people. For instance, you might get hit on the head and your personality could change. That's a pretty drastic example, but people change and relationships do. And so I'm always curious, well, what's a deal breaker? What is a deal breaker? And your answer is well taken, that we would do the steps before the deal breaker occurred to prevent it from happening. And that's probably the best anybody can ever give. But do you see where I'm going? Like, what is really a deal breaker?
For us, because I think every couple has to answer that. I mean, I think what's a deal breaker, right? For couples, it could totally vary.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to even concoct one. I mean, we were just saying infidelity, would that be a deal breaker? And Andy, you sort of said it, but you were like, no. I mean, not at this, like, that wouldn't even necessarily be a deal breaker at this point.
You know,
right?
I think most couples are saying that are in this room. Almost every couple says it's not.
Well,
What about long-term physical abuse?
Like on each other?
Yeah.
Oh my
yeah,
God.
I think
But
that the deal breakers would involve serious personality changes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if we're thinking of just fantastical possibilities, then certainly there are deal breakers. If Jen decided that she loved fighting and she screamed at me and the kids all day, every day, and it was always walking around on eggshells, I would still stick around for a pretty long time. But if it ever became physical, that would be a hard one. If it ever endangered the kids, things like that I can't really see as being
So extreme.
realistic.
You know, that's a
But
good way of putting it.
That's
that-
how it
So
would.
extreme.
That's how extreme we have to talk about for it to be a deal breaker.
Got
for
it.
me.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the category for you two of fantastical
Definitely.
Right. It's
that would probably
I
only
haven't
come about.
I haven't seen any evidence of this behavior so far.
Right. Okay. Good. Okay. So other people will often say that the two of you seem to have almost a magical relationship, that it looks so good on the outside, and that you always want them to know that it is a good relationship, but that it takes work. And I'm curious what that work is.
Well, I mean, one, I think some people are always surprised to hear that we went to couples therapy after 1 year of dating.
Yeah.
So, because even like you, from the outside, you got, everything was such in a good place. And that's the thing. It was in such a good place, and we opted to go before it got to a bad place. Right? So
Right.
I strongly recommend that to couples too. Like, go before you're in a crisis, because by the time you're in a crisis, it could be too late almost.
Yep.
And we're like, I think one of the biggest things is we're fortunate that we get along so well and our personalities are so compatible, and we see things in the same way, especially with child rearing. Like, we don't have conflicts about that because we instinctively want to do the same thing. So we don't have these big areas of conflict. We want to live our lives the same way. One of us isn't trying to get A while the other person really thinks B is more important. We generally have a lot in common, so that's helpful. But I'm really sensitive to connection and disconnection, and I think like we are so quick to each of us bring up something. We've created such a safe place to bring things up with each other, and I'm just like, I'm just feeling disconnected. I know it's kind of silly, but if I don't let it go for very long at all, and it's sort of, for the boats, I feel like we're constantly making sure we can be retethered. And a lot of the times it's just me freaking out, and Andy's like, I'm right here, babe. Like, I'm actually,
that's interesting.
I'm like super, and I was like, oh, because I didn't feel like you were. And he's like, and he'll reassure me. I'm like, okay.
So how does that usually go
we
down?
We have that conversation like a lot.
Tell me how the conversation goes.
Every few months, I'll be minding my own business, maybe watching television, and she'll come over and she'll say, can we just have a check-in? And that's always how it starts. And I'm like, all right. Sometimes I see it coming. Most of the time I don't.
Do you ever get defensive or triggered with just the question?
I do get internally triggered every time, but in the same way as if someone is like, what's wrong? You seem mad today. Or did you know you have a sunburn? There's things they're not rational. They will trigger me till the day I die.
Yeah, they're annoying to hear those things.
But I also have the wherewithal to address them in real time and not lash out at her.
Right.
I say, yeah, what's going on?
Yeah.
And we talk about it. And it's usually one day, like a single hour conversation. Sometimes we take it over the course of a few days.
How does the conversation go?
She'll tell me everything that she's thinking, and we definitely.
Can you give me examples?
Yeah, I mean, it really just echoes what she was just saying. Like, I'm really feeling like we're just not as connected right now, and I feel like you've been playing a lot of video games lately, and we've had some late nights, and it just seems like we're in the grind right now, and I'm just not feeling settled and connected about stuff, and I just want to know, are you feeling that way too? And I'll answer, and usually I'm not. Usually everything is like hunky dory.
So you'll say everything's hunky dory?
Yeah, it'd be like, because most of the time I don't recognize this being, I don't read her mind that way, and generally I think to the outside observer it would seem like in those situations it's not like, again, we're not fighting. It's not like there's friction going on in the house. We're just in the grind.
Yeah.
And God bless her, she has the wherewithal to put everything on hold and just say, hey, let's make eye contact here and tether these boats again.
Let me pause. Let me pause
and
back you up to that moment where she says, "Is everything okay?" And you say, "Yeah, everything's fine." I want to highlight that specifically because that's in my experience, that's a tricky moment for the person in your situation. Because on one hand, you love and trust Jennifer immensely as your partner, and so you've got to validate what she's saying as legitimate. On the other hand, you're not feeling it. And so you also need to validate what you're experiencing without quashing what she's experiencing.
That's exactly right.
How do you do that?
Well, I would say that that's one of the nuances of really trusting each other, is that those kinds of simple questions and answers are not loaded. They're really not for us. And so she knows if I say, I'm feeling pretty fine, what's going on with you? Jen, you don't take that as, you're not like, how could he not feel the way I'm feeling? Like it's not loaded at all for you, right?
And do you take his answer at face value, Jen?
I do, but I will probe more.
She will. And
I'm like, really? Because you seem X, Y, and Z, or, and sometimes I feel like I can get a little bit of content from you. You can be like, yeah, I've just been kind of in this place, and versus everything's, I feel like sometimes don't you have awareness sometimes that maybe you've been, but it's not it's not like you're like, oh, I'm shutting down from the relationship, but you won't realize that maybe you've gone into your man cave a little bit, and
totally.
Like I'm more needy in that way, so I'll be like, hey, like I need I'm like the person in the relationship who needs like more attention than he does, and I think sometimes you realize, oh, I guess I haven't been
totally
as aware of that, so it's not. So sometimes I get like satisfying answers, like there's something else that he could be doing to make me feel better. And those are really satisfying conversations, of course. But there's other times where he'll be like steadfast, like everything's great, kind of like turn the mirror back to me, like what's going on with you? Like, why are you feeling so unsettled? You know, and maybe there's something else that I need to be made aware about what my own issues are at that time or something.
Yeah, and I would
They
say
could
there's
go both ways.
Yeah, there's three outcomes there. It's either everything truly is fine with me,
Right.
And-
Which eventually she'll believe.
Yeah. I say everything's fine, but then she knows me really well. She'll probe and we'll uncover things, and I'll feel little triggers of defensiveness, but ultimately get to a place where I'm like, yeah, you're right. I guess it's because I've actually been feeling unvalued at work, da-da-da-da-da, and she's like a little therapy session for me.
Right.
And then there are the other times when, I aside from turning it back on you and saying, oh, what's really going on with you, then there could be times when you don't have to break down any walls, and I just say, actually, yeah, this is what's going on. Thank you for noticing.
Yeah.
You
know what's interesting? I'm imagining right now that a lot of times when fights happen, it's because one person checks in with the other and gets like a spring-loaded response that has much more energy and reaction in it than they anticipated, which hurts. And then there's this defensive reaction, then it turns into a fight. Whereas with you guys, it sounds like maybe because, Jen, you're so sensitive to disconnection, you check in before that spring really gets a chance to load, or before the slingshot really gets able to pull all the way back. Is that accurate?
That's definitely. I don't let it go very long, so it's not like something that kind of piles up and that I'm internalizing and becomes this big deal.
Yeah.
Like for me, the quicker I get it out, the less loaded it is, right?
Yeah.
And
so much easier to deal with.
both of us, I mean, I knew this early on with Andy, that both of us we're just not easily triggered. Like it takes a lot to trigger us. And I think part of that is we've done a lot of therapy work in decades prior to sort of find the tools to deal with all the intense emotions that you're feeling at one time,
Which still happen.
But now it's like you just notice it. Like, oh, I could get defensive right now, but I don't need to, because I know that this is really what's the deeper issue going on, right? And so I think we both have pretty strong set of tools in that area, and it's one of the reasons why I agreed to have children with him. Was like you're kind of unfazable, so it's a pleasure, right? It's like a pleasure to be around people to work out your issues when it's just not all that noise. There's really no need for it.
I mean, even to use your analogy of the spring coming, being so far loaded that it comes out with a lot of force. I do remember one. It would have almost been a fight, but it was too hilarious. I think Sophia was born at this point. I think she was an infant, and we were just so underslept and aggravated, and living in this little 550 square foot apartment with stuff piled to the walls, and I was getting pretty heated, and I think you had checked in, and I was definitely raised voice. But in real time, I was like, I'm sorry, I'm so triggered and being such a shithead. This is the best I can do right now. That was like as as gruesome as it got. I
want to ask you about that. Were you? It's really adorable. By the way,
best I can do right now. I remember
yelling.
I remember yelling that at the top of my lungs, and then I was laughing at myself. This is so ridiculous.
Right.
And you must have thought it was incredibly endearing.
Yeah, I mean, it's so right. If you package it that way, like this is the best I can. This is the best I can do. It's like there's awareness there.
Yeah.
Right? And he's aware of how it's affecting me. And so having him take a moment and get flustered about something, knowing that he has awareness about it, I don't have to drive that.
You can just let it be its process.
Yeah.
And
right? It's when you don't think the person is aware that drives me nuts. And then my past relationship, I feel like the person was so self-focused that it was always like, it's all about you. Like you have no sense of how this dynamic is being created that affects both of us.
Right.
Right. And I really enjoy with Andy that he that we can talk very much about like, this is my contribution to this dynamic right now, and this is, you know, your contribution to your dynamic right now. And we share the responsibility all the time, which I think is huge. Huge. So then I don't have to get triggered because I'm like, he hears me. I know he hears me. He just can't give me what I want right now, but I know he knows what I want and he's trying.
And then you can just go away and give him space.
Yeah. Which I had to learn through couples because that was so hard for me.
Oh, yeah, I remember. That was one of your major takeaways.
Oh my God,
that's a big one.
huge.
Can you talk about that and unpack it? Because that's huge for
every
couples.
man wants to hear this right
I know.
now.
Yeah.
So it was pretty.
And every woman needs to learn it.
I think Andy was the first man I'd been with who really needed his cave time.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Like, I'm so much more fun to be around. Like, why would you not choose this? Right?
So
like,
true.
I am like at your disposal like all the time. Don't you want this all the time?
so funny to think about.
I interpreted it as he was rejecting me, or he didn't, you know, he didn't want kind of like he was opting out of the relationship or opting out of the connection. And I took it also personally.
Yeah.
And then we went to couples, and our therapist totally helped me reinterpret it. Like, Jen, Andy's just different than you are. He's just different. You know, like he needs his space and it has nothing to do with you. And it took me
the two of you.
Or the two of you. Yeah, it's like, you know, that's just that's his pace, right? That's like sometimes he needs like, and it doesn't have to be about me. And yet the therapist was like, but you need to feel validated in that moment. So, you know, maybe you can say, you know, we had to come up with things like agreements, like, I really want to talk about this right now, but Andy's not in a place to talk about it. So, okay, can we come back to it tomorrow? And like, I needed to know that there was going to be a time when we could address that. And I needed to be able to set that like date. And then I could be like, okay, now I'm going to walk away, even though I have all this stuff going and I want to resolve it all now, but I'm just going to walk away and give Andy space. And I know that we'll come back to it tomorrow, you know? And so it was just like literally having to practice those tools. And now we don't have to do it. So now it's just, I mean, I'm not super great. We just had a conversation this week where Andy's like, you didn't really check in to see if that was like a great time for me to process all that. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I meant to do that and I didn't. And I should have asked you, like, is now a good time for me to like just vomit all of my issues all over you? And he kindly listened to it, but afterwards he was kind of annoyed. And he's like, the reason why I got annoyed is because I probably wasn't in a good space for that, but I didn't articulate that to you. And I was like, yeah, and I'm sorry. I forgot to check in and even ask if it was a good time for me to do that, right?
Right. So you both kind of broke one of your fundamental
Yeah.
rules because you're getting so used to it with
Yeah.
one another, and it
You
had a
forget to
tiny
practice.
consequence.
Yeah. But
then
tiny.
you went right back to,
Yeah.
okay, well, let's just do the rules.
Right. Well, I went and did the dishes for 30 minutes and got my thoughts together and then came back and said, well, I'm going to go to bed, but let's talk about this first. Here's why I got annoyed.
Let me ask about his going into his cave thing. So it sounds like there's two types of this scenario. One is where Andy needs just quiet video game, drink a beer on the couch, sports watching time.
He's like, keep talking.
Right. Which I think all humans need, but it's exemplified by the man in our culture going into his man cave. So there's that kind of time. And then the second type is where you've got something you need to talk about the relationship or about your feelings or about the relationship.
Yeah.
And he's not in a place to process.
Right.
And he's self-aware enough to be able to say, I'm not in a place to process right now. And if we try, it's not going to go well. And so he needs to go away, get into a good place to do that, and then come back and talk about it.
Right.
So those are two separate things,
Yeah.
and they both happen.
Yeah.
Which one of those was harder for you to allow him?
Oh, they're both equally hard. Because to
And
me, it all feels the same.
Oh, it all does? Okay.
It all feels the same. It's like,
Why?
oh, I
Why?
can't have him right now. I don't know. Like, why do men need to be in, like, the cave? You know, I think it's just a, I don't know, Eric. What is that about? I don't think it's, feel like it's just kind of my personality. Like I have a lot of room for that kind of a stimulation and that kind of a connection. Like my bucket, that is like it would take a lot to like overfill that bucket. And so, but I don't feel like it comes from a place of insecurity.
Yeah,
it's just that's kind of my favorite thing is to connect with people. It's like
connection. It's your connection thing. That's how you know that
drives the kind of work I do, like how I want to live my life, like how I want to spend my time. It's about people, you know, connecting with people. I'm an extrovert. I'm like very classically that way. And Andy's more of an introvert. And so it's more, I had to learn like that his way is just as legitimate as mine, and that my way of being in the world or needing that is just one option. You know, it's not like that's the healthy model. It's like that's just me, right? And that his bucket can be overflowed, you know, can be overfilled like pretty quickly.
Which doesn't mean anything about your being bad or wrong or right.
And nor for him being bad or wrong, right? So like, oh, okay. It's like truly accepting the differences and figuring out how to make room for those differences for each other.
Well, that's it for the first half of the Andy and Jen interview, folks. Thanks for listening. Be sure to tune in on Thursday, where we get to hear how adding children into the mix changed everything for these guys. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to us on iTunes and leave us an honest review there. It makes a huge difference. And if you really want to support us, consider donating to our crowdfunding campaign at patreon.com/together. That's patreon.com/together. It makes a big difference. So thanks a lot. If you have any questions or comments, or if you would like to be on the show, please reach out via one of our platforms. You can find our website at www.together.guide. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. Twitter and Instagram are both at @together_show, or you can always email me at host@together.guide. Our producer is Charlene Goto. Our web designer is Courtney Munna. Our art director, and my one and only, is Aubrey Pick. I'm rushing home to see her in just a matter of moments, and I can't wait. And thanks once again to my guests, Andy and Jen. Guys, date night, Studio D, not too bad, right? Let's do it again. Be sure to tune in on Thursday for the second part of this interview, in which you will hear...
I mean, I can see why if someone's like, I do not have enough skin in the game, and this sucks, and I'm out of here. It's a pressure cooker, and that I can see it in the distance as a reality for people who don't have the resources to fill in the blanks for each other and to be there to support each other, even when they themselves are feeling like total dog shit.
That's all for today, folks. See you next time.